Hello, Try 312 Network. Coach Brian here, and welcome to episode 4 of our Try Talk series here on the Try 312 channel. Today we have the pleasure of speaking to my wife, Sarah Farris, who is a licensed clinical professional counselor here in Illinois, as well as licensed in Wisconsin. She is a therapist working with adults and specializes in treating OCD, anxiety, and related conditions. Some of her clients are also athletes that are dealing with some of these conditions or are working through sport and performance anxiety, stress, and adjustment. We look forward to having a really interesting conversation with Sarah today about athlete mental health, and hopefully we get a lot of great response from you out here in the audience and to help open up the conversation about athlete mental health and specifically with triathletes. So welcome today, Sarah Farris. Okay, and welcome everybody. Welcome to our next episode of Try Talk. Today we are really excited to have my wife, Sarah Farris, on to talk a little bit about mental health. As of this recording, it is toward the end of May. We're hoping to get this out at the end of May this month because May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And what better topic to discuss than mental health and mental health with athletes, in our case, specifically triathletes. So Sarah, thank you so much for being here and talking to us about this.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Great. So let's get to know you a little bit more. So in our introduction, we gave our audience a little background about who you are and who you work with. But let's dive deeper into it and just tell us a little bit more about the type of clients that you work with. And then we'll talk a little bit about your relationship with triathlon.
Sounds good. So I'm a licensed professional counselor in Illinois. I also have a license to practice in Wisconsin. I have an outpatient therapy practice, and I specialize in working with adults and treat OCD, anxiety disorders, and other related conditions. I also see some clients that are athletes and that need assistance with either performance anxiety or some of the conditions listed above. Or are just dealing with stress or performance issues related to training, competition, or just adjusting through the different phases of athletics.
Okay. And speaking of athletics, what sort of athleticism do you participate in?
Well, I currently do a lot of like strength specific training, barbells, kettlebells, do the occasional sort of leisure event, nothing on the elite or professional scale at all, but just kind of for fun. And I actually grew up riding horses, and I was an equestrian for about 25 years.
Amazing. And are you yourself a triathlete?
I am not a triathlete. I'm triathlon adjacent. So I'm the support crew. I'm the person on the side cheering people on, kind of the tri-Sherpa, as the term has been coined in the community. So I get to see a lot of what goes into triathlons. So both the training phase of it, as well as the competition or race and event side of it as a observer.
And would you be able to guesstimate about how many triathlons you have attended, whether as specifically a tri-Sherpa for yours truly, or for just any other events that you happen to be there to just mainly cheer on, whether it was for one of my races or some of the races for some of our other athletes that we've worked with over the years?
I mean, more than 10. 10 sounds kind of like a low number, but I mean, some of these are longer courses. So half Ironman, full Ironman. I've been to a number of the Chicago triathlon races when they come around here every year. I haven't been to every single year since living here, but I don't know, something like 10 to 20.
Okay. I think that's a pretty fair number. over the last 11 or so years. So in that time, not only hearing from me what is kind of goes on, not only in terms of training, but also what I experience on race day, you have also had the opportunity to work with me with a lot of the athletes that I work with, both on a one-on-one basis, but also when I worked with a group or with a club here in Chicago. So over that course of time, would you say you've had the opportunity to get to understand a little bit more about the mental side of what goes on in both training and in racing a triathlon?
I think so. Yeah. I think, in a general and broad sense, I think so. I know everyone's going to be different and kind of have their own lived experience. So I think in a broad way, yeah, I've gotten to get a really good bird's eye view of what it's like to get into training, what it takes to sort of maintain consistency and progress over the course of the training season, and kind of all the things that can occur on race day.
And this actually isn't a new experience for you or for us. We've had the opportunity, and you multiple times now have had the opportunity to speak to the Ironman group. So our local coordinator for Ironman that works with a lot of the clubs and helps with a lot of the events for the Midwest specific races here for Ironman. His name, a gentleman by the name of Joel, he had reached out and asked you to speak on behalf of, the mental health professional to talk about anxiety and things that triathletes go through. And again, speak to it on a more broad, a little bit more of a general basis. But there are moments where things do sort of come down to the triathlete level, things that are a little bit more specific, that are contextual, right? But from having watched that, participated in these conversations, it sounded like there was a lot of athletes out there that were really involved with the conversation. They really appreciated the information being spoken to about this topic. I think it's one that we don't get to hear very often, or to have athletes participate in the conversation. So what we're hoping for is that this continues to allow athletes to be more open about their mental health, to talk about the anxieties and the things that they go through, not only with training, but also racing a triathlon. So in that regard, let's really start today and talk about the general things that athletes might have to go through as it relates to their mental health. I think it has become a little bit more prevalent in the world today, based on things that we have seen, specifically from someone like Simone Biles, that was very out in front, very talked about the last Olympics. We also have somebody like Michael Phelps being very open about their mental health. So when it comes to Olympic athletes, and hopefully more so other athletes throughout all genres, we can open this conversation up a little bit more. So in that regard, can you start to talk to us a little bit about what are some of the things that, or some of the stigmas around mental health and mental health in athletes?
Yeah, so I agree with what you said. It's great to see a change in the conversation and discussion around mental health, especially with some really elite and well-known names and high-performing athletes like the Olympians that you mentioned. Historically, and I think for the majority of time, I think that there's been sort of this like misconception of like athletes being kind of like superhuman, that an athlete just knows how to perform under pressure and can always bounce back after, some sort of struggle or failure or problem. And they just don't struggle like other people. And that's simply not the case. Everyone's kind of susceptible to either just challenge in life, whatever that might be, or an actual mental condition, including athletes. So it really does a disservice if we continue to sort of maintain that type of conversation around athletes, and sort of minimize or dismiss what they may actually be going through. So some common things that athletes might go through, and as well as triathletes in particular, are things like just general pressure. There's a lot of pressure to perform and feel ready to go and confident on race day. To feel like you've done all you can to train and prepare for the race, as well as things that are outside of your control, like the conditions of the race or other people or your equipment or the roads. There's just so many other barriers that can come up that can feel a little bit stressful. That stress might also kind of make people feel anxious or worried or have a lot of doubt. That kind of gets them feeling a little bit less confident. So in general, just sort of the stress or pressure to perform, I think is highly relatable to most. And, athletes might also experience changes in mood. So up here in the Midwest, we have these beautiful summers, but we also have some pretty dark and gray and gloomy winters. And so most people have a response or a reaction to those weather changes and seasonal changes. And so it's kind of normal to feel a little less motivated or kind of gloomy or tired or have a high level of fatigue, just getting through those months in general. And now if that includes getting in a really cold pool on a very cold winter morning, that can be a challenge to have to work through just on the day-to-day or sort of weekly basis within training. There's also sort of the movement through the season where there's sort of this gradual uptick and a higher volume of training, and then getting into the race or whatever races you're doing through the season, and then just sort of a natural dip or decline towards the end of the year. And so that in general can also create some degree of a shift in mood with folks. There can be a lot of excitement and goal orientation around those, high peak performance months. And it can feel pretty tough or isolating even in the months that, there aren't really any races going on or the season's kind of come to an end. In a more broad discussion topic, and, maybe we don't necessarily need to go into this so much today, but just to kind of put this out there is that, athletes and non-athletes are at risk of depression, anxiety, eating disorders, substance misuse. These are things that are kind of common conditions that a lot of people might face. And athletes are also, to a degree, at risk for some of those things too.
Is there a point, or are there markers, identifiers, things that an athlete or even support members, family, friends can look out for or should be cognizant of, where some level of depression or some level of anxiety should be a point at which one would recommend perhaps seeing somebody professionally, like seeing a therapist, having somebody to go talk to?
Yeah. So you don't have to wait. No one really needs to wait for things to get really, really bad in order to start therapy. A lot of the time, most people can find some degree of access to get in to see a therapist. There might be some waits or certain things to kind of explore in order to kind of like get the ball rolling there. But, I would recommend that, you definitely don't need to wait until things are dire to start seeing a therapist. And then in general, think about sort of like, what's your baseline level of functioning? What's your baseline level of mood like? Think about how you're able to sort of tend to daily tasks or responsibilities. So like going to work or going to school or maintaining your household, maintaining relationships, showing up in your relationships, staying committed to other responsibilities that you have. If you're starting to notice that these things, that something going on is creating a barrier or some degree of impairment or difficulty with just sort of general level of functioning, that's definitely something to think about and keep in mind. But if you just don't feel good, if you feel anxious a lot, if you're worrying a lot more than usual, if you feel sad or unmotivated a lot of the time, and if it seems like it would be a good idea to the individual to, reach out and find a therapist, then that's a great reason to start.
And again, coming back to some of the stigmas around mental health care, the perception of the athlete needs to be strong, push through these things. In some cases, on the physical side, it's things like, ow, that hurts. I'm injured. Oh, well, I'm a little bit tired. I can just push through it and I should be okay. Or I need to be able to push through it because I'm strong. I'm an athlete. I don't want to be seen as or feel personally weak. What would be your response, or how would you direct someone feeling those things?
Yeah. So, I think gently I would disagree with the sentiment there that, having a mental health concern is not a sign of weakness. It's really more a sign of being human. Being human includes challenges and a wide array of emotions, or, just things that we go through that might be hard to face alone. And the answer isn't to just always ignore it and try to power through and kind of force your way out of it. Obviously, you and other coaches know that pushing through and ignoring an injury is a pretty harmful thing to do and not advised. And I would agree with that rest and recovery and giving your body some time to heal. And that might mean scaling back either some part of training. And if maybe the, events that you have coming up would still warrant, staying on par with those goals. But that maybe you have to scale back some part of training temporarily so that you can show up on race day feeling, the best that you can. Or it might mean reevaluating some of those goals. But ultimately, ignoring a real situation is unfortunately maintaining those stigmas that certain people, in this case athletes, aren't allowed to have difficulty. And I think that sends a message to other athletes out there, and including especially younger folks. I think kids and young aspiring athletes look up to a lot of the athletes around them or the ones that they can see professionally. And I think it's really great when they can, I respect privacy 100%, but, when those that do speak out and talk about, just living through real human experiences and reaching out to resources or support to, take care of those things. I think that that's really, really important for everyone to see and to normalize it. It doesn't mean that this is less of a person or less of an athlete or not as, goal oriented. I think it really hurts athletes to discourage them from taking time away. And that, taking time away should be applauded, especially if you have an injury or if you have some sort of situation going on in life that needs attention. You should take care of that.
And you've mentioned a few key groups that are extremely important to the life of an athlete, and in our case, triathletes. And that is family support and coaches and team members. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you feel or what you can see as their role in supporting an athlete's mental health?
Definitely. Yeah. So I would love to do a quick little plug, if I may,
Of
for
course.
Anxiety in Athletes. This is just an outreach and advocacy group that I'm part of that provides resources to athletes, coaches, family members, staff, just support people to help reduce the stigma of mental health concerns and to best support athletes going through whatever challenges that they may face in their sport. It's currently a website. We've got other things kind of growing and developing as a resource that's kind of building at the moment. So that's one place that I can just direct people to. But in general, to sort of answer this question, things to kind of provide to coaches, support people. I think coaches just always leading with empathy and compassion, being able to listen and not minimize. I think if an athlete is speaking to their coach about something that's maybe hard to talk about, that takes quite a bit of courage, and there might be a lot of vulnerability in speaking up. And so just meeting them with kindness. You don't need to be their therapist, and you shouldn't be. But to, just accept what it is that they're hearing, to accept what they're trying to say, and find some degree of resource or support that might feel within reach to that person, to that coach, whatever that might look like, to be encouraging and supportive. So that might mean encouraging a pause in training if needed, or recommending some referrals to, whether it's a psychiatrist or psychologist or a doctor, physician, a therapist, a support group, whatever it might be. And then when it comes to family members, this might kind of vary a bit, but I think kind of in the same boat, don't try to fix the person, don't try to fix the problem, but, ask questions, come up with a sort of strategy, or work together on kind of what feels like the best approach, whether that is, again, a therapy approach, or taking a bit of a pause, or trying something new or different.
Great. Thank you so much. And we will provide the link and the information on how to reach out to the Anxiety in Athletes site and some other resources that are out there that Sarah has mentioned. So please highly recommend going to check that stuff out. And Sarah, you mentioned strategies. So let's talk a little bit about that now. And without necessarily having a full session or going into too deep into, for lack of a better word, into the weeds, is to talk about maybe some things that athletes can do that are relatively simple strategies or approaches that they may take when they find themselves having a moment of high anxiety, especially like, let's say, for example, let's take the swim, for example. That is an area, a part of our triathlon world that seems to have a significant amount of anxiety associated with it, both not only in terms of, again, the training for it, building and developing the skills and endurance to complete the swim, but also getting out and going into open water, whether that's for the first time or the 100th time, and being in that environment where it's hard to control the environment, how many people you're around, so many things. So there's a lot going on there. What are some simple strategies or approaches an athlete can take to help minimize having that level of anxiety, whether on a training day or on race day?
That's probably the number one complaint I hear a lot with triathletes, is sort of the anxiety around the swim portion of the race. So, I think some of the basics are, definitely work with a coach if you're feeling intimidated or afraid of the swim. A coach that has a lot of experience with triathlon will be able to give a lot of really, really good information and just guidance and tips on the training process on how to get stronger in the swim, and just kind of know what to expect, especially if it's sort of a first time racing, or first time in open water, or first time at a new race location. The newness can kind of feel intimidating and scary. So, knowing what to expect, maybe having some simple practice techniques to use. So let's say maybe it's, if you're in a traffic jam, what do you do? Like, what's the approach to kind of either stay with the traffic or find, a little bit of an opening at some point, and how to kind of like navigate that and not get overwhelmed by it. Or it could be a matter of, focusing on how you're timing out your breaths, or things to help you conserve your energy, since you don't want to get too exhausted early in the race. So all these subtle things like that. A lot of things that might be addressed in therapy around these kinds of worries is sort of learning to notice what kinds of thoughts are coming up. A lot of the time, anxiety is related to things that haven't happened yet. So worrying about things going wrong in the future. And so being able to kind of recognize that that's a thought about something that hasn't yet happened, and we really don't have a whole lot of control to problem solve a thing that is yet to come. And so being able to kind of first recognize that and then take some steps back, other things on how to respond to those sorts of thoughts when they occur, because we can't always control our thoughts, but we might be able to make decisions around how we react and respond to those thoughts. And so those are some things that can be talked about in therapy, for example, things that are usually developed in this kind of conversation is ways to maybe bring a little bit more flexibility to the thoughts, or how to notice and, kind of reduce sort of the judgment or over catastrophizing of the thought or feeling that occurs. A lot of the time, anxiety also includes physiological discomfort. So shortness of breath, tightness, tension, increased heart rate, sometimes dizziness or vision changes. It can feel kind of scary. And so learning to develop ways to respond when those feelings happen instead of trying to avoid them or, stop yourself from continuing to perform because you're afraid that you might have those feelings on race day or during training. So a lot of the time, athletes might hold themselves back if they start to get a little too hyper-focused on what they're worrying about. So if they're worried about not swimming with the correct style of stroke, or, if their pace or timing is off, or if they're feeling a little bit more fatigued or tired than they expected to at a certain point in the race, or what other people are doing or whatever, that they can start to feel a little afraid or even panicked. And so by turning towards those kinds of thoughts or sensations, we'll actually start to create almost like a timid, less confident approach to performance. And what we want to do is try to kind of find our way out of being held back and timid, and trying to find a little bit more ways, fewer more ways to kind of get back into a sense of confidence. And so even having conversations with a coach on just like little reminders about things that you are confident in, that you can do, and you don't have to think about it and you don't need to overthink it. And so that might be specific to the athlete, some part of how they are doing in their training, for example, or what skill, or maybe it's their cardiovascular capacity or something like that, that they can turn towards, or, even just gently turning towards, a point in the race, or, maybe they're spotting, or, taking a moment to kind of pause and see what point they're at in the swim, and then regroup and redirect, ways of just kind of turning away from the worries. So these are a couple of strategies that I use often.
No, that's absolutely great information and great advice. And as you're talking through all of these things, I see this in multiple respects and in several different types of athletes. Not only, as we started the conversation with the hypothetical athlete that is nervous jumping into the water, going into the water, starting the race, but I also hear in this conversation those that have the pressure to perform, whether it's for themselves to do good, right? The ones that, hey, maybe are trying to hit a PR, and that have pressure for themselves to perform, or may have some thought that they have to perform for their friends or family, or for a coach, or for a team, and having that anxiety come through them as well. And if something gets derailed, or they don't have the swim that they wanted, in being able to refocus, reframe where they're at, and to be able to continue to perform and not let some things that may not have gone right or have gone perfectly derail them from still having a good day, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Excellent. Sarah, thank you so much for all of this information. We're going to leave it right there because I would think we could have a conversation after today. And hopefully if we have a lot of great athletes and coaches and teams and people that are within our triathlon community here in Chicago, perhaps they get a chance to watch this, start seeking out some of these resources and maybe start coming in, asking more questions. Great to have that conversation, begin this conversation a little bit more, and maybe take some of this information, take some of these comments and questions and develop them into an ongoing conversation, if you would like. I know we would appreciate it, but if you're interested in continuing this conversation, that would be wonderful.
Of course, I'd be more than happy to.
But I think today so far, this is all great information, a really great start. And again, with the expectation and the hope that we will continue this conversation. But before we let you go, we do a little thing here on our Tri Talks, which is a final 3-1-2 moment, which is to provide 3 pieces of advice to triathletes out there, specifically newer triathletes, and 1 final inspirational message that you may have to the community in the last 2 minutes here. And since we've already kind of talked about advice and strategies as it relates to mental health, I'm going to flip this around a little bit. And since you are one of our more experienced Tri-Sherpas out there, I'm going to ask you what your 3 pieces of advice would be to new Tri-Sherpas out there, and what 3 key tips that you would have for them to support their athletes in their first race.
Okay, so definitely have a plan for race day. So know the course, know when the athlete is about to start or what, kind of the race start is. Have an idea of where you're going to park yourself or how mobile you want to be, if possible. Some races are very, very easy to navigate and get around and move from one point to the next, and you can see your athlete a lot, and some of them not so much. So have a plan and talk about it. Strategize with your athlete. Pack your own race day needs. So this might be snacks and hydration or some degree of entertainment, because there are going to be probably some slow moments. So that can be reading materials or a portable phone charger in case your charger battery starts to drop a little. Keep in mind that, in my opinion, I think being a Sherpa is a sport. Spectating is a sport. That's sort of what I say. Is spectating these races, especially when they get into bigger distances, is a sport. Your last half Ironman, I tracked 7 miles on my Garmin, and I was carrying around a whole big heavy bag of stuff. So, think ahead of, what level of mobility you will need as a spectator. A lot of the time, there's certainly the option to be able to just come and watch a part of it and leave, or come back later, or find a restaurant to go sit and enjoy a meal. But there's usually a high amount of mobility needs. And so, think about what level of exertion you as the support crew expect to commit to on the day, and plan ahead.
Yeah. And I think with all that, and of course, all great advice, I think a slight extension to that would be also to recommend, because of all that, to communicate with your athlete and
100%.
making sure that you are in sync as best you can with all that information, that you're doing this almost as a team, and
Yes.
you're there to provide as much support on race day as every volunteer and race director and support person there at the race. So thank you for that. And thank you for all that you have done for me personally and for a lot of our athletes that you've supported over the years. And any final inspiring message to these aspiring triathletes out there here in 2024?
I think you know, just signing up for a race is a really big deal. It doesn't matter how fast you are or how big of a distance or what big of a race or how many races you're doing. The fact that you're doing this is so awesome and very inspiring to so many people.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for your time. Great advice to all of our athletes out there. And again, hopefully this will be an ongoing conversation, maybe our own little personal mental health Tri-Talk series for all of our athletes out there here in the Chicagoland area, maybe even generally here in the Midwest. But great information, great advice. We will provide all of these resources that Sarah has mentioned down below, and if not more so. But please let us know if you have any more questions or comments or would like to engage in this conversation a little bit more with us on the Tri312 network, whether it's with the coaches here or would like to see Sarah come back and have some more conversations with us in the future. But Sarah, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.